Hollywood's golden age shimmered with elegance. But behind the glamour lurked a deadly addiction that claimed countless legends. These screen sirens dazzled audiences with beauty, mystery, and power. Yet off-camera, many lived in a haze of smoke that slowly consumed them. Today, we reveal the shocking truth behind old Hollywood's most iconic women. And the cigarette habits that shaped, and destroyed, their lives. Which legendary actress smoked 4 packs a day while filming her most famous role? Let's begin. Bette Davis, the woman who smoked her legend into history. Bette Davis wasn't just a star, she was a force of nature. 2 Oscars. 6 decades of dominance. Those hypnotic eyes. That dagger-sharp delivery. But behind her commanding presence hid a dependency she never tried to hide. Davis didn't simply smoke. She performed with cigarettes. Wielding them like props, weapons, punctuation. In All About Eve and Now, Voyager, that famous moment where she lights 2 cigarettes? Not acting. It was addiction, dressed as romance. At her peak, Davis burned through 3 to 4 packs a day. Chain-smoking through interviews, rehearsals, even meals. Her daughter once revealed. Mother measured her life in cigarettes, not minutes. When doctors begged her to stop, Davis snapped. I'd rather have a cigarette than breath. Even after a stroke in 1983 left her partially paralyzed. Nurses found her trying to light a cigarette with the one hand she could still move. Davis knew the cost. She called smoking her chosen poison, and it ultimately contributed to the cancer, stroke, and emphysema that ravaged her final years. When she died in 1989, she had smoked an estimated 1.5 million cigarettes. She lived, and died, on her own defiant terms. Joan Crawford, elegance masking self-destruction. Joan Crawford clawed her way to the top through pure ferocity. Sharp cheekbones. Sharper ambition. But behind the polished exterior was a woman chained to a habit she refused to quit. By the 1930s, Crawford was smoking 3 packs a day. Despite carefully instructing photographers never to capture her lighting up. Off-screen, her fingers were yellowed. Cigarette burns riddled her expensive costumes. She who scrubbed her hands 20 times a day thought nothing of filling her lungs with smoke. When her husband Alfred Steele begged her to stop, she replied coldly. I'd sooner divorce you than my cigarettes. By the 1960s, her voice had deepened to a rasp. Makeup artists worked overtime covering the smoker's lines around her mouth. When cancer took her in 1977, few were surprised. Even on her deathbed, she whispered for a final cigarette. Marlene Dietrich, the goddess of smoke and shadow. Marlene Dietrich didn't just smoke, she weaponized it. Cigarettes were part of her myth. Her allure. Her power. She could communicate more with a curl of smoke than most actresses could with an entire monologue. Dietrich chain-smoked constantly, sometimes lighting a new cigarette from the one burning out. She favored custom French brands, softer, she said, for a lady. Up to 60 a day. Even after 4 heart attacks. Even into her 80s. When urged to quit, she dismissed the idea with a laugh. Darling, I survived Hitler, Hollywood, and fashion. A little cigarette won't kill me. But it did. Her final years were spent confined to her Paris apartment, her legendary voice reduced to a gravelly whisper. Katharine Hepburn, America's strongest woman with a secret weakness. Katharine Hepburn projected vitality. Athletic, independent, unstoppable. So the truth shocked those closest to her. She began smoking at 16. And climbed to 3 packs a day. Her iconic tremor? Not character. Not age. Nicotine damage. On set she smoked between takes, during rehearsals. Even while performing her own stunts. Director John Huston once said, Kate would finish a grueling scene gasping for breath, then immediately light a cigarette. Even after a major health scare in 1984, she refused to stop. I'd rather die sooner as myself, she said, than live longer as someone I don't recognize. Her longevity was extraordinary, 96 years. But those last decades were marked by trembling hands and labored breath. A body fighting the damage of 60 years of nicotine. 5. Lauren Bacall, the voice built from smoke. Lauren Bacall's husky voice defined an era. But that sultry tone wasn't natural. It was manufactured. Director Howard Hawks told her to drive into the Hollywood Hills every day, reading aloud while chain-smoking, until her voice dropped to the iconic growl that made her famous. She and Humphrey Bogart smoked constantly. Friends joked that they communicated through smoke signals. Even after Bogart died of throat cancer, Bacall couldn't quit for decades. Her voice became a rasped shadow of what studios once sculpted it to be. 6. Rita Hayworth, the goddess who couldn't escape the haze. Rita Hayworth, the love goddess, began smoking at just 12. It was her escape from fear, control, and the pressures of impossible beauty. Studios hid her habit completely. No photos, ever. But behind closed doors, she chain-smoked to manage anxiety. In her 40s, memory issues emerged. Early Alzheimer's. Doctors believed heavy smoking accelerated the decline. Eventually, she forgot her films, her fame, her fans. But never the muscle memory of lifting a cigarette to her lips. Lucille Ball, America's sweetheart with a 3-pack secret. Lucille Ball revolutionized television. Yet secretly smoked up to 3 packs a day. She created smoking corners just off the I Love Lucy set, to preserve her wholesome image. Her marriage to Desi Arnaz was strained by her constant irritability when she couldn't smoke during long shoots. After her death, her children found hundreds of cigarette burns on her home furniture. Silent evidence of an addiction the public never saw. Claudette Colbert, the elegant smoker. Claudette Colbert, the queen of sophistication, hid a 3-pack habit behind charm and wit. She even insisted on being filmed from her left side, because smoking damage was worse on the right. In her later years she lived tethered to oxygen. The cruel end for a woman once symbolizing effortless grace. Ava Gardner, beauty, whiskey, and self-destruction. Ava Gardner smoked unfiltered Lucky Strikes, the harshest commercial cigarette of the era. 4 packs on stressful days. Nicotine, whiskey, and anxiety formed a self-destructive cycle. After a stroke left her partially paralyzed, she still smoked with the one hand that worked. Without cigarettes, she said, what would be the point of continuing? Lana Turner, the sweater girl who watched her beauty burn away. Lana Turner began smoking at 15. Studios hid it fiercely. No one wanted a dream girl with an ashtray mouth. But in private, she chain-smoked through heartbreak, scandals, and 7 failed marriages. When throat cancer struck in the 1990s, the voice that seduced audiences vanished into a whisper. Tallulah Bankhead, a voice made of smoke. Tallulah Bankhead didn't smoke. She devoured cigarettes. Up to 120 a day. The legendary rasp? Nicotine damage. Hitchcock once said. Tallulah doesn't have a voice, she has an event. Her final words were reportedly a request for a cigarette. One she wasn't allowed to have. Greta Garbo, Divine Mystery, Dangerous Habit. Greta Garbo kept her addiction hidden. She smoked in secrecy, refusing photographs with cigarettes. 2 packs a day. All while cultivating a public image of near-divine purity. When she died in 1990, her lungs told a different story. Ravaged by decades of hidden dependency. Veronica Lake, The Fall of the Peekaboo Goddess. Veronica Lake's signature cool masked deep anxiety. Cigarettes became her coping mechanism. 3 to 4 packs a day in her prime. When fame faded, smoking increased. Alcohol joined in. Her beauty evaporated. By the 1960s, she was unrecognizable, tending bar in New York. Yet still smoking through each shift. She died at just 50. Barbara Stanwyck, the tough girl who couldn't quit. Barbara Stanwyck started smoking when she was just 9 years old, picking up discarded cigarette butts on the streets of Brooklyn. By adulthood, she was a full-time heavy smoker, often finishing 2 to 3 packs a day. Her tough girl persona on screen, especially in Double Indemnity, came directly from real life. She smoked in nearly every break between takes. Even when emphysema landed her in the hospital later in life, Stanwyck still tried to sneak cigarettes into the bathroom. Her addiction stayed with her until the end. Ingrid Bergman, the wholesome star with a hidden habit. Ingrid Bergman had the image of a pure, wholesome angel. But behind the scenes, she quietly smoked up to 3 packs a day. Studios hid her habit completely, banning any photos of her with cigarettes. Even after discovering a cancerous lump in the 1970s, she continued smoking through treatment. Her battle with cancer remained private, just like her long struggle with nicotine. Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde destroyed too soon. Jean Harlow, Hollywood's original platinum blonde, smoked around 40 cigarettes a day during her peak. Her chronic smoker's cough masked the early signs of serious kidney problems. By the time she finally went to the hospital at age 26, the damage was irreversible. Harlow's life ended abruptly, another old Hollywood star lost far too young. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart didn't just act like a hard-boiled detective, he lived like one. Bogart smoked constantly on and off the set, often lighting a new cigarette with the last burning one. During the filming of Casablanca, it's estimated he smoked more than 40 cigarettes a day. Directors even complained that scenes had to be res-hot because Bogart's voice grew too raspy from the smoke. The habit caught up with him. By the mid-1950s he developed esophageal cancer, which he privately battled until the end. Bogart's iconic smoky silhouette became part of his legend, and part of his downfall. Clark Gable. Behind Clark Gable's polished, gentlemanly image was a dangerous addiction. He began smoking as a teenager and eventually reached 3 packs a day. On sets, Gable smoked between every take, especially during Gone with the Wind, where crew members joked that the smell of smoke followed him everywhere. Years later, Gable suffered a massive heart attack. Doctors believed heavy smoking was a major contributor. Even in his final days, he refused to quit, saying it was one battle he couldn't fight. James Dean. James Dean's rebellious persona was no act. He chain-smoked unfiltered cigarettes, often while racing cars or practicing lines. Friends said Dean used cigarettes like emotional armor. Whenever he was anxious, a smoke was already in his hand. During the making of Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray warned him to slow down, but Dean laughed it off. Dean's life ended early in a car crash at 24, but photos of him with a cigarette became some of the most iconic images in film history. Bette Davis. Bette Davis almost turned smoking into a trademark. Her husky, powerful voice, once called the sound of fire and anger, came from years of heavy, constant smoking. Davis smoked up to 4 packs a day, even during rehearsals and script readings. She refused to quit, saying cigarettes helped her think, breathe, and fight. Later in life, she developed breast cancer and suffered a stroke. Still, she continued smoking, calling it her lifelong companion. Paul Newman. Known for his calm blue-eyed charm, Paul Newman secretly struggled with a strong cigarette habit. In his early career, he smoked nearly 30 cigarettes a day, especially during his breakout films like HUD and The Hustler. Newman eventually quit in the late 1970s, but he openly admitted it was one of the hardest battles of his life. He later supported anti-smoking campaigns, hoping to keep young actors from repeating his mistakes. Steve McQueen. The King of Cool was rarely seen without a cigarette. Steve McQueen smoked heavily, especially while performing his own stunts and racing motorcycles. Doctors later found asbestos-related cancer, and while asbestos was the main cause, McQueen's chain-smoking made his condition far worse. Even during treatment, McQueen couldn't fully quit, proving how powerful his addiction had become. Rita Hayworth, the beautiful lie Hollywood built. She was called the love goddess. The woman whose beauty could stop time. The star who lit up the golden age of Hollywood like no one else. But behind the glamour, behind the red lips and the dazzling smile, Rita Hayworth lived a life of pain, pressure, and quiet suffering. A life shaped by studios, controlled by men, and shadowed by the habits she turned to for comfort, including a cigarette that never seemed to leave her hand. This is the forgotten story of Rita Hayworth. Before she became Rita Hayworth, she was Margarita Carmen Cancino, born in 1918 to a family of dancers. Her father pushed her relentlessly, rehearsals, performances, long nights on stage. As a teenager, she was already exhausted, working in nightclubs to support her family. Hollywood noticed her talent, but not her identity. Executives told her she was too Spanish, too ethnic, too dark. So they decided to change everything. Her hairline was raised by painful electrolysis. Her hair was dyed into the fiery red that made her famous. Her name was replaced with something more American. Margarita Cancino disappeared. Rita Hayworth was born. But with that transformation came immense pressure to be perfect, glamorous, flawless, every second of her life. And that pressure would become the reason she began smoking heavily. Rita's rise was meteoric. Her dancing dazzled audiences, and her beauty made her a global icon. But behind the scenes, she was anxious, shy, and deeply insecure. Studios demanded impossible perfection. She was expected to rehearse long hours, attend endless publicity shoots, and hide every flaw behind a mask of glamour. To cope, she reached for cigarettes. What started as a studio suggestion, "It'll calm your nerves," became a habit that followed her everywhere. On set, in rehearsals, between dance takes. Crew members would joke that the smoke curled around her like a personal spotlight. By her mid-20s, Rita was smoking nearly 2 packs a day. For her, cigarettes became more than a habit. They became a shield, a tiny moment of calm in a life she never fully controlled. In 1946, Rita starred in Gilda, the role that changed everything. When she stepped onto the screen, tossing her hair back in slow motion, the world fell in love. But Gilda didn't just make her a star. It trapped her. She became the fantasy woman, the seductive dream men desired, and the glamorous icon women admired. But the real Rita was nothing like Gilda. Off camera, she was quiet, gentle, and tired. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, not worshipped as a goddess. Instead, the studio doubled her workload. More films. More photo shoots. More expectations. And through it all, she kept smoking, the only comfort she allowed herself. By this time, Rita was up to 3 packs a day, using cigarettes to push through exhaustion and endless pressure. Rita Hayworth's love life became tabloid obsession. But the truth was far more heartbreaking. Her marriage to Orson Welles, brilliant, chaotic, artistic, was doomed by distance and mistrust. Rita smoked constantly during their arguments, using each cigarette as a way to hold herself together. Then came Prince Ali Khan. Hollywood believed she had become real royalty, but inside, she felt more isolated than ever. Life in a palace was lonelier than life on a film set. She smoked through the stress, through the heartbreak, through the exhaustion of trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect star, the perfect fantasy. Every relationship added another layer of emotional weight. And another cigarette to ease the ache. By the 1950s and 60s, the glitter began to fade. Roles grew fewer. The spotlight dimmed. And Rita, who had spent years hiding behind makeup, studio control, and cigarettes, found herself exposed. Her health started slipping. She often appeared confused on set, struggled to remember lines, and moved slower than the dancer she once was. Hollywood whispered cruel rumors. She's drinking too much. She's depressed. She's aging. But the truth was far more tragic. Rita was developing early-onset Alzheimer's, decades before the world understood the disease. The smoking didn't cause it. But it made everything worse. Her breathing, her heart, her energy, her ability to cope. The woman once worshipped on billboards was now forgotten by the very industry that built her. In her final years, Rita lived quietly, far from Hollywood's glare. Her memory faded bit by bit. First names, then faces, then entire chapters of her life. Cigarettes, once her constant companion, became something she vaguely recognized but no longer relied on. The world that had adored her, had let her slip into darkness. Reporters only paid attention when she looked frail, confused, or lost. A cruel contrast to the woman once called the most beautiful in Hollywood. Rita Hayworth passed away in 1987 at the age of 68. Her autopsy confirmed years of health decline, exhaustion, and the long-term effects of stress and constant tobacco use. Rita Hayworth lived a life shaped by the spotlight, but consumed by the shadows behind it. She was transformed, controlled, adored, and forgotten. All while carrying the weight of a world that saw only her beauty, never her pain. Her story reminds us that Hollywood's brightest stars often shine over the deepest wounds. And sometimes, the most glamorous legends are the ones who suffered the most. Rita Hayworth wasn't just a goddess. She was a woman trying to survive a world that demanded perfection. One cigarette at a time. Rita Hayworth wasn't just a Hollywood icon. She was a woman shaped by forces she never controlled. Studios that redesigned her face. Audiences that worshipped her image. And a world that never let her truly be herself. Her life was a masterpiece painted in light. But her struggles lived in the shadows. Behind every smile was exhaustion. Behind every glamorous pose was pain. And behind every cigarette was a moment of escape from a life she never chose. In the end, the love goddess was not defined by her beauty. but by her resilience. A woman who kept dancing, kept acting, kept surviving. Even as the world tried to own her. Rita Hayworth's story is a reminder that the brightest stars often burn behind the darkest clouds. And though Hollywood may have forgotten her in her final years, the world never will. Her legacy lives on. Not in the fantasy they created, but in the truth she left behind. This was Rita Hayworth. The woman behind the legend. The soul behind the smoke. These women defined an era. They shaped film history. They inspired generations. But behind the fame, behind the glamour, behind the legends, was an addiction powerful enough to steal voices, beauty, breath, and lives. Old Hollywood created icons. Cigarettes destroyed them.